Raptor Spank here, and today we have my usual seasonal thing. End of the season, I hit Masters, I do this little video, or I have done it the last couple of times. Originally it was just a post on Twitter, but the last couple of times I've done a video. Last time I merged it with a meta check, but this time we got there a little bit quicker, so we didn't have to merge it with a meta check. Despite the fact that this season was way shorter than all the rest, which was terrible. I don't know why they cut it so many weeks shorter. But they did, so a lot less time to get there, but we still got there with a couple of days to spare. I'm not exactly sure when I'll have this video done by. You'll know, obviously, because you're watching it, but hoping to have it out Sunday, but could be Monday. We'll see what ends up happening. But essentially what we're going to do here, talk about the decks I played, how going from best to worst, how they did, and what my thoughts on it were, and then after that we'll talk about just the general meta, the season, what it was like playing it, what my thoughts are, that sort of thing. So starting off right at the top, let's see here. We do have Azir Aurelia. 57 games played. This is the deck that got me to Masters in the end. So, yep, I'm a dirty scumbag playing the best deck out there. But realistically speaking, I did not have a lot of time, obviously, to get to Masters, so just makes sense to play a really stupid good aggro deck. That just makes a lot of sense. So, played a ton of Azir Aurelia, went 68% win rate over those 57 games. Going a little bit more into individual matchups against other Azir Aurelia, went 5-3, 63%. I'm just better than other players. Simple. Nah. But generally speaking, aggro is kind of my wheelhouse, and there's definitely some players who didn't really get the give and take quite as much as I think I generally do in that situation. So we pulled better than a 50% on it, by decent margin, actually. Thresh Nasus, 3-1, 75% win rate. Pretty crazy considering the deck is actually supposed to be favored into the matchup. So the fact that we steamrolled it is kind of crazy, and kind of explains why Thresh Nasus has been disappearing when it's losing even its good matchup. Ezreal Draven, 5-0, did not lose a single game against it, absolutely blasted that deck, which is pretty funny because on the flip side of the matchup I went 50-50, so it's weird that I just completely demolished the deck, but Aurelia decks do seem to be pretty good into the matchup. Discard aggro, 2-1, 66% win rate. Generally favored, but they can race us, so it really is a bit of a toss-up. Dragons, 4-2, easy matchup. If they win, it's just they manage to stabilize long enough for the life steal or lifelink, and that's pretty rare that they can do that, so generally speaking, just bulldoze them. Lissandra Talia, same thing, 2-1, 66% win rate. But one of the more interesting things, 0-4 against Azir Darius Burn. So that's a little bit wild, but it's worth noting all of those games were post-nerf. So I think the Blade Dancer nerf was kind of what was needed to push that matchup that way. Because when I played the flip side of it, I was still losing to Azir Aurelia, but that was pre-nerf. So post-nerf, I think, really helped the deck out quite a bit. So if you're running into a lot of Azir Aurelia, which you are, because everybody is, you can play Azir Darius Burn, and that should have a really favorable matchup for you, especially if you have, like, the nuts hands. But just in general, it seems pretty strong into there. But that's Azir Aurelia. Next highest win rate deck, shocking. 66% win rate, 32 games, it's Aurelia Misfortune. Another Aurelia deck, very similar to Azir, but instead of the damage buff from Azir and the extra Sand Soldiers, we kind of try to replace that with damage triggers. Things like Crackshot Corsair dealing 1 damage every time you attack, and Misfortune dealing 1 damage every time you attack. Generally makes the Thresh Nasus matchup a little bit better, but realistically speaking, playing this deck, I went 50-50 with most other decks. Like, I 50-50 with Azir Aurelia, I 50-50 with Thresh Nasus, 50-50 with Discard Aggro, and then 100% win rate against Ezreal Draven. Really weird. Deck's doing really, really good, but most of the decks I played had that really easy time against Ezreal Draven. Maybe it's because it's a kind of tricky deck to play. That would be my best guess, because it definitely didn't feel that bad on the flip side, because the next highest deck is Ezreal Draven Tempo with 65% win rate over 23 games. Had generally decent time against most of the meta decks. Only played Threshnasus once, won it. Lysandra Talia was the biggest concern, so it was starting to get a bit rough when that was really meta, but when that fell off, the deck did a lot better. But generally speaking, Ezreal Draven, it's the same deck. It's so good every season because it hasn't really effectively been nerfed in quite some time. Not since the original Super Ezreal nerfs, but yeah, it's a really solid deck. It's a good one because you can win most matchups. Like none of the matchups are like super unfavored. I don't even think Zerarelia is as unfavored as it seems suggested from playing the Zerarelia side of it, but yeah, it's a solid deck. Definitely one of my favorites all time. So loved playing it. It was good this season too, although I did drop it in the end and go to a Zerarelia because it was just way more easy wins. So that was the best for grinding, and that's where we ended up. Next up is 64% win rate over 11 games on Azir Darius Burn. Still pulled a fairly high win rate, although we didn't play too much. And again, all those games were pre Azir Aurelia nerfs, so that definitely was kind of unfavorable for it. That improved over the long run. So definitely solid deck. Well worth running. I'd actually expect it to be even better now. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Surprisingly low at the next one, 56% win rate over 9 games on Threshnasus. It was at one point 4-1, which was really good, but then it kind of collapsed from them by going 1-3. So we still ended up positive, but the deck kind of weird. It should be good right now, but it's just not, and that's the crazy part. Like when I was playing Azir Aurelia, which is the matchup that's supposed to lose heavily to Threshnasus. I mean, I won that most times, which is really wild because when I play Threshnasus, I absolutely dumpstered the Azir Aurelia matchup. So I'm not really sure what happened there. If it's just people are tweaking their deck lists or something, and that's made them weaker overall. But yeah, Threshnasus felt really bad. I played it a little bit in Diamond thinking I was going to climb on that because I thought it would have the best matchups against everything. But yeah, gave that one up real quick. It just did not feel good in the second half of the season, but it was a powerhouse in the first half. So weird feelings on that. After that, though, we do go into the losing records. And right off the bat, 33% win rate over 3 games. It's Teemo Elise Sumpworks aggro. You've probably not seen this. I actually thought about doing on the grind for this, but I lost to Threshnasus twice in a row, which that is the 2 losses on the deck. It also beat Ezreal Draven, so it continued that tradition as well. But it was all meta decks, and I lost to Threshnasus, and Threshnasus was really big at that point, so I kind of dropped the deck. It's really neat, though, and if there's some heavy nerfs going into the next season, I might have to give it a try again because it's just tons of fun. You get your Sumpworks posse very easily, lots of ways to copy it. Really neat deck. I was definitely hoping it was going to be better than this, and funny enough, I started off the very first game of the season. I played this deck, ran into a Zerarelia, and won. But that's why I kind of came back to it later in ranked, thinking maybe it would work, but it just did not line up well enough against the meta, so I dropped it. Then Lysandra Talia, we did do an on the grind on this, 33% win rate over 12 games. I lived up to what I said. I said on the grind I probably wasn't going to play it again until the end of the season. I'll probably play it before the season ends, now that I'm in Masters, but I definitely dropped it because it just was not good for climbing at all, because the Azir Aurelia matchup is super doomed, and you're going to see that every single day you play. You're going to see Azir Aurelia. I don't think I had a single day I played where I didn't see that matchup at least once, and usually more than once. So, terrible deck for climbing right now, but it's a really fun deck that is very powerful. So, if you've got time to kill, you're not grinding anymore, definitely recommend playing it. Fun, neat little deck. Then we hit our 0% win rates. 1 game played, IF Elusives. I played every season, and this season wasn't the season for it. Sadly, and in an even more poignant loss, it lost to the new Ionia aggro deck on the block, Azir Aurelia, proving to us why IF Elusives has been left in the dust by the much faster aggro decks, as we got absolutely slammed. We were close, funny enough, but weren't fast enough to get there, and, gotta play it every season. That was my game. Lost this time around. We won last season. Oh well, but then from there, 0% win rate, 2 games played, Freljord Fiora. I bet this win rate would have gone up substantially if I played a bit more, but I would kind of expect it to be around that 40% mark. But basically, I thought I was going to play for On the Grind, lost 2 games in a row, including one to like a bad deck, so I just gave it up. I was very done with it at that point, so yeah, not great. But I think it would do like a 40% if I actually put more games into it. And I might actually play it a bit in Masters now that I've got some time to kill. And I've actually been enjoying playing ranked lately. So I might do some Masters mono Fiora just for fun. And lastly, 0% win rate, 2 games, Renekton, Sivir, Freljord, Overwhelm. This is a pretty popular deck right now. And it surprises me because the deck's terrible. It really is. I've played both sides of the matchup quite a bit, and like Azir Aurelia just dumpsters this deck. Absolutely dumpsters it. They have to go running wild to kill you, essentially. So I think it's a really, really bad deck. Well, I think it's like probably a B tier deck, but this current meta doesn't allow B tier decks at all. You're not allowed to play those decks if you want to pull a 50% or higher win rate. That's just how it is. But before I jump into some general meta thoughts, I just want to talk about my overalls. 92 wins, 60 losses, which brings us to a 61% win rate over 152 games, which does make it my second highest win rate season of all times. My highest was a 62% win rate, which was it was 11 more wins and 3 more losses, I think. But yeah, it was my second best season, which is pretty funny because it's the worst season I've ever played. I hated it. I hated every moment of it, pretty much. The very beginning was really fun, messing around with Aurelia Misfortune before we learned just how busted things were, but this was the worst meta. Without a doubt, 100%. I've been playing since beta. I played in the Darrowing meta, and you know what? You got to play B-tier decks and decks like that a lot more in that meta, and you did have some, I mean, it was mostly aggro and control with Anivia Control and Darius aggro, but there were some mid-range decks that were kind of carving out a nice niche for themselves, and it just did not feel nearly as bad as this season. Like, Darius aggro was killing you on turn 6. Like, Azir Aurelia can kill you 2 turns sooner without that much difficulty, and you can have some crazy turns where you're just like dead instantly. You're talking like Sparring Student, Dunekeeper, swing on turn 2 for 1 billion and like half health your opponent. Like, this aggro deck is the most brutal and just ridiculous, just so bad feeling, worse for the game ever deck that there has ever been. There has never been a deck worse for the game. Like, I would rather play into like OG standalone Fiora Zed 10 times for every 1 game of Azir Aurelia. I'd rather play against Darrowing. I'd rather play against any of those decks. And the crazy part is, in the Darrowing meta, because of how bad that was, it was like maybe 2, 3, at most 4 weeks of Nightmare. And when it was doing so well, they just absolutely decimated Noxus aggro, and it was still good. Like, Noxus aggro decks still existed and were still good, but they nerfed Legion Rearguard. They nerfed Crimson, Crimson Bloodletter, the 2-drop one. They nerfed Legion Grenadier. You used to do 2 damage when it died. They nerfed Basilisk Rider right after buffing it too. Like, they nerfed all of these cards. And then Azir Aurelia does this crazy nonsense and they nerf 2 cards, which is just a great example of right now Riot does not care about their game or their players. Not as much as they used to, and I'm really hoping that changes. They said it's going to change, but they told us that with the Fizzlusives nerfs. They did an amazing patch on Fizzlusives, nerfing everything. Like, Fizzlusives got nerfed heavily, Aphelios midrange got nerfed heavily. It really shook up the meta and was really awesome, and then they immediately stopped doing it, stopped caring. So, I mean, I know I've been beating on the drum of this, but, like, they sold us on this promise over the many months of this game existing. So often they were doing these huge group of nerfs, plus a bunch of buffs, and they talked about how they didn't like that oftentimes their buffs didn't do much. But you know what? I'd rather you still do that, and, you know, maybe it makes a huge change, maybe it doesn't, but at least things will be different, and with huge nerfs and all that stuff, you're going to see a constantly rotating metagame, which was really, really fun, and not that bad in Legends of Runeterra, because it's pretty easy to get cards for free. So it's not really a huge problem to be rotating people's decks out, essentially. And I mean, previously what they did was really nice because you could still play the decks that you enjoyed and that you had bought all the cards for. It just wasn't going to be as good, and maybe you're going to be down towards the 50% win rate. But if you really like the deck, you still got to play it. So they never really heavy-handedly nerfed it like that, but like, that was just so much better. It was so much more fun to play then, and it's not even like the cards that they're making. Like, I actually was super excited for Shurima, and a lot of their stuff's really cool. Like, the Lissandra Talia deck is frustrating to lose to, but like, on the whole, it's a really neat deck. It's very different from other decks that have existed. It's like a really cool synergistic combo deck and all that. But like, it's the worst time to be playing because of Azirarelia. It's just so bad. Ranked feels so awful. It felt as good as it did. I was starting to enjoy it again because I was playing Azirarelia, just dumpstering kids. Like, that's not how the game should be. So I'm really hoping things get better because this was definitely my least favorite season I've ever played in. And it was my least favorite meta, but like, it was twice as long as Darrowing. It was 2 months instead of like 1 month of Nightmares. So it's like the worst they've done. Without a doubt, the worst Riot has done. And I know that they said that they're going to take it more seriously in the future and do more heavy nerfs, but I really am very concerned that they're going to start the new expansion with some huge nerfs to a bunch of different decks, just like they did with the Fizzlusives one, and then they're not going to do it again. They're just going to be like, all right, our job here is done, and just let whatever toxic new deck comes, it just completely stomp us again. So I'm hoping Riot can redeem themselves, but this was miserable, and it just really sucked a lot of the fun out of the game for me. So hopefully the next season's a little bit better. If you enjoy this video and look at the meta, you can leave a like, comment below, let me know what you'd like to see in these kind of videos, and subscribe for more Legends of Runeterra content.